Hello, let's talk about our shadow selves. Does that sound a little too woo-woo to y'all? Well, I've got good news. We're going to use cognitive functions and the concept of cognitive functions to kind of put some concreteness to that more abstract concept. So first of all, let's define what is a shadow self. A lot of people have the misconception that it's like our evil side. It's the bad parts of us. That is not the definition that I will be operating from in this video or any other video where I discuss the shadow self. Our shadow self is our unconscious. It is basically the pieces of us that we are least aware of. As part of the human experience, one of the things that all humans do is we split ourselves into these pieces. Some people refer to this as fragmentation. The pieces of ourselves that we kind of show to the world, that makes up what we call the ego. Those are the pieces of ourselves that we deem most valuable, most lovable, most useful, helpful. It's the parts of us that we show to the world and identify with. It's the piece of us that we would call our personality type. Contrast that with our shadow selves may be the pieces, like I said, that we're least aware of, but it's also the qualities within ourselves that we push away, we deny, suppress, or reject about ourselves. And before you say, not me, I don't do that. Oh, yes, you do, friend. No worries. Everybody who's a human does this. It's just part of the human condition. We all have pieces of ourselves that we kind of like leave tucked away. The cool thing is that kind of expanding our awareness of our shadow selves can really help us to expand and grow as a person. The very act of intentionally seeking that awareness is kind of what facilitates that growth. Now to the cognitive functions piece. There are a total of 8 possible cognitive functions that we know of at this point in history. There's probably more that we haven't assigned titles to. But for the purposes of this discussion, we'll go with the 8 that are most commonly used and talked about. This involves thinking, feeling, intuition, and sensing functions. And each of those 4 types of functions both have an introverted and an extroverted orientation as a possibility. So an individual will have 4 cognitive functions in their ego. That's our go-to, those are our favorite. And then the remaining 4 will be in what we're referring to as our shadow self. These tend to be the 4 functions that we least prefer, that we're least aware of, and they happen to be in the exact preferential order as the cognitive functions in our ego. They just are flipped around to the opposite orientation. If you want a refresher or an explanation of the cognitive functions in our ego, I'm going to refer you to this video where I talked about the cognitive function slots within the ego and how each slot behaves. For example, you could have the same function. We'll take extroverted intuition, for example, and it's going to behave kind of differently in the top spot, the hero spot, versus the second, third, or fourth slot. So for more information on that, watch that video. So we're talking about the shadow functions today. So those are the final 4. That would be positions 5 through 8. So when do we access these functions? Well, if you think about how a person operates with preferences, they go to their most preferred options first. Those are the 4 functions in our ego. What will send us into the other parts of our mind, including the shadow, would be when those first 4 functions fail us. We've already gone to our top 4 choices, we've run out of options, and therefore we must find other options. Now, this usually happens subconsciously. It's not something that we're aware that we're even doing. All kinds of things can send you into your shadow. Running out of options, like I mentioned, stress, trauma, any sort of traumatic event like diagnosis. For those of you who are new here, I myself am a cancer survivor. I talk about this on my other channel. I can put a video here if you're curious. I was diagnosed with stage 3B Hodgkin's lymphoma back in September of 2018. I'm actually coming up on my 3-year diagnosis anniversary. I am in remission now, but things like this can send us into our shadow. Divorce or breakup can send you, or marital or relationship problems can send you into your shadow. Unexpected events, especially for the types who love to plan, this can send us into our shadow. For example, INFJs and INTJs, we love to plan. We love to be on that one best path, that goal that we have in mind. We want to stay on that path. Sometimes things beyond our control knock us off that path, or maybe sometimes we don't know what the best path is yet. Things like that can send us into the other sides of our mind, either the subconscious, which we'll cover in another video, or the shadow. All right, so same 4 functions, opposite orientation. Let's just pick a personality type for the sake of illustration. I always use INFJ, I feel like, so I'm gonna switch it up today and use ENFP as our example. All right, so the ENFP's ego functions, that's their most preferred, would be the following: extroverted intuition, introverted feeling, extroverted thinking, and introverted sensing. All right, to see what their shadow functions are, you take those same functions and flip the orientation. So their 5th function would be introverted intuition. Their 6th function would be extroverted feeling. Number 7 would be introverted thinking. And number 8 would be extroverted sensing. So in general, especially younger ENFPs are not going to have a very good awareness of these functions. Now, as we have more life experience, as we grow and mature and we encounter traumas and things that force us to develop our shadow functions, people mature and grow parts of themselves, even if they don't have this language to explain it in. So yeah, and that's why it's hard to type a lot of people who've been through a lot of trauma, who maybe grew up in an unstable environment, had abuse or neglect. A lot of times that will send us into the other parts of our mind, and it makes people a lot tougher to type. All right, so with the 4 functions that I named, ENFPs have an INFJ shadow, and the reverse is also true. INFJs have an ENFP shadow. And now we're going to go through positions 5 through 8. They all have a name, just like the positions in the ego do. The 5th slot, or the first in the shadow, is called the nemesis function. First of all 4 functions in the shadow tend to have a negative or pessimistic slant. When you start to grow your awareness of your shadow self, you can change that. But in general, this is kind of how it goes. The nemesis slot tends to be a point of worry for the user. So with the ENFPs, they have introverted intuition, nemesis, and it also, for any of the personality types, it's going to counter that hero function. So if you think about like Batman or some of the comic books, how there's like the hero and the villain, it's kind of like that kind of vibe. So ENFPs, their hero function is extroverted intuition. They tend to be extremely optimistic about the possibilities. Well, their nemesis function tends to worry about their own future, their own best path forward. It does not like canceling out all those My ice maker always goes off during these videos. So ENFPs with NE hero, extroverted intuition hero, tend to be extremely optimistic about the possibilities. Other qualities of NE, like they're very aware of what other people want, what other people are about to do. It's almost like a form of precognition. They like to be wanted by others. So the way NI nemesis would kind of counter that, it would be worried about its own future. It would be unaware of the best path forward. It does not like canceling out all those possibilities. You can see how the same function behaves so differently depending on what slot it is in. Again, an INFJ, introverted intuition, is very optimistic, and an ENFP, kind of pessimistic most of the time. It often doesn't even know what it wants. It doesn't know what that best path forward is, and it has a hard time like pinning down a favorite possibility. Let's talk about position number 6. This is the critic function. This is where people tend to criticize others or themselves. For example, ENFP have extroverted feeling as their critic function. They prioritize how they themselves feel, but they don't want to make people feel bad. This can manifest as kind of like people pleaser tendencies. Think about like an unhealthy INFJ. That could be how it manifests in an ENFP. Also, they don't like when other people act like jerks. If people are going around being a jerk, the ENFP is probably going to say something to him about it. They don't like that. They're people-focused idealists, and they want people to be happy. Number 7 is the trickster spot. And this slot is basically like a person's blind spot. It's probably the function that they just can't even see. Like they're totally unaware of. ENFPs have TI trickster, that is introverted thinking, absolute truth, logos, and ENFPs can really be unaware of absolute truth. They're more with that TE, they're more of consensus thinkers. The problem with that is sometimes the consensus is not correct. ENFPs and ESFPs in particular need to have TI users around them to help kind of sort it all out. And in the absence of fact, perception becomes reality for these types, which can mistakenly, even though they're well-intentioned, it can lead them to believe things that simply are not true. All right, we're finally to number 8, and it's the demon function. And it sounds like super evil. It's not necessarily. I have seen people, including ENFPs, who have a well-developed demon function. It's super interesting. I've seen ENFPs that succeed at building things. I'm thinking of one specific example of a YouTuber that I know of, and people mistake him for a censor, and I know that he's an intuitive. Anyway, the demon function is where we go as our last resort. It's the dead last. It's like we've exhausted all of our other options and we got nothing left. Again, very unaware of this option. Most of the time it comes out under stress, under chaos. For the ENFP, they have SE demon, which is extroverted sensing. I have seen several exceptions, but most ENFPs are going to be really unaware of like how to make things look beautiful, for example. They just don't care. They don't care. And in the demon function slot, what can happen is they've exhausted all their nice guy possibilities, all their idealistic ideals, and they just want to smash something. And ENTPs have this too. So ENFPs and ENTPs, when they are on their last straw, they're highly likely to like punch a fist through the wall, to throw something. They're not the fighting type, but if you push them to that point, they may throw some punches. Or at the very least, they're gonna wanna give you a bad sensory experience of some kind. Again, we can work on these things, and merely having an awareness of them is the first step into that personal growth. Another interesting thing is how these shadow functions affect compatibility. That is, we are subconsciously looking for partners or for friends. We're looking for people to balance us out. And so it is super common, even if you know nothing about MBTI or any kind of personality science, it is highly likely that you're seeking out someone who has your opposite 4 functions. I myself married someone who has my opposite 4 functions. It's weird. I knew nothing about this when we got together, and I started learning about this stuff, and I was like, holy cow. I guess there might be something to this. And I started noticing other couples that I know and kind of typing them and being like, holy cow, yeah, they line themselves up. I think we're sort of wired to do this. I think it's by, I have a personal belief that there is a God, there is a divine creator. And I think that we're divinely created this way to seek out things that are gonna make us whole, to help us develop ourselves, to help us heal our traumas, to help us grow as people. So people with our shadow functions, they could be extremely attractive to us, or maybe we're just drawn to them in a friend's type of way. Whatever the case, I think all in all, what we're seeking to do here in life on planet Earth is to heal ourselves and to become whole again. And it's kind of the opposite of fragmentation. You know how I mentioned at the top of the video, we split off pieces of ourselves throughout life as we encounter traumas, or we are socialized and we think, oh wow, this piece of me is gonna maybe cause others to reject me, so I'm gonna tuck it away. We're trying to become whole again, and people refer to this sometimes as integration. Again, some people can get really abstract and woo-woo when talking about integration, but for the purposes of this video and to maybe help someone who wants to work toward integration, working with your shadow self is a great place to start. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you liked it or if you learned something, give it a thumbs up. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for all the comments. Y'all bring me so much joy seeing all the people leaving comments on my videos recently. So thank you for being here, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye. Okay, I think we're good. Cut.